So we have a mini assignment to build a landscape and try to use a second image as a sample. We need to add gradients for every single part of the image, and I'm going to go with these islands from Vietnam. Maybe I pick another one. So just googling up an image, maybe that image. Isn't it beautiful there? Something is wrong with my mouse today. It's just not clicking. What the heck? Just the mouse is not looking good. Let's find another one. All right, I'll go with that one. So just simply copy the image, drop it into Illustrator, and put it on a pasteboard. Right? The pasteboard is a large gray area. You can put there anything you want. It's not part of your document really. It's just like a pasteboard area. You can play around, but the artwork is going to get to here in the center. And I'm going to use the artboard tool. I'm going to change the size of my artboard to the image. Okay. Let me see. So I'm going to start with the main shapes. I'm going to add first the water. Let me just go with a primitive shape like a rectangle. Okay. And I already have a water kind gradient I created earlier. I'm going to do some changes. So you can play around with the gradient in a gradient window or with a gradient tool. I think at that point I just need the gradient window. And I'm going to change the transition between the light and the dark blue. And actually it shouldn't even be blue because I'm seeing the water is more like greenish. Okay. And I'm just going to rotate that gradient. All right, I think for first step I can go with that. And let's see the sky next. I'm going to add another one, or maybe I'm just copying the water. Hold on the Alt, Shift. I'm going to move it up here, change the size, and I'm going to change the gradient. So it's going to start from a light blue. And it's going to a very, very light blue. Almost like white. Okay. And I think I'm going to name that layer to background. I'm going to create another layer, island. Islands.
Professor, is it okay for this assignment? Like, what if your reference image is a vector graph? Is that okay?
Please use a photo. Use a photo. Use a photo. Challenge yourself. Try to do something.
Or can we make something off the top of our head also?
You can. I think the image helps a lot, but if you want to do something from your head, you can. So I'm using the Wacom tablet now for building creating the shapes of the islands. I'm going to trace it a little bit, just to save time.
What did you say you're using to do that?
I use a pen tool. I'm just tracing a little bit. I don't like to trace, but it's a mini assignment. I really don't want to spend too much time with it, so I'm just going to trace. Okay, and I'm going to create another gradient for the islands. So it's not going to be a hyper-realistic image because I don't have time to create gradients and shapes for every single little piece on parts of the image. I'm just going to create something in a style. So maybe I'm just adding the cliffs first. So I'm going to create a gradient for the cliffs. I'm going to pick colors. I'm going to change it from, I'm going to add that angle. Maybe I'm just going to start to use the gradient tool. So I'm going to rotate that gradient. Maybe that color is a little bit too dark. Okay, and I'm going to apply the same gradient on the other islands. I can grab the gradient in the gradient window and I grab it on other images. That's a quick way, shortcut. But I still have to play with the angle with the gradient tool. I'm just going to rotate, change the size. All right. And the next step, I'm going to add the shapes of the green. So I'm going to get the pen tool, and I'm just going to start to trace the plants. I'm not worrying about the gradient at this point because I'm going to apply it later. So first I'm just drawing the shapes. Let's see some more. So on purpose I'm going to add a lot of tiny shapes now because I'm going to apply the same gradient to each shape, but I'm going to change the angle, the size, and the rotation on each of them. And just simply use the pen tool and the vacuum. And I keep it very, very simple. It's just a mini assignment. It shouldn't be more than like 35 minutes you should spend with it. Because we're going to start the fantasy landscape today, the fantasy or sci-fi illustration. And I need you to start sketching. So you can sketching in your sketchbook, or you can use the vacuum. If you know how to use Photoshop, I'll let you to do digital. But any other way, you should have a sketchbook with you. Do you guys have a sketchbook with you? That is part of the class. We should have a sketchbook. I'm finishing with the plants here. Let me see. I'm going to create one gradient for the plants. For the plants, I'm going to use a radial type. Let me change some colors first, adding some greens. Oh, and I forgot to posting around the attendance sheet. Please put your sign on it. So I'm going to create the first gradient first. I'm going to create a sample gradient, maybe adding a few more colors. And it's going to be a radial kind of this time. Okay, and let's see the gradient tool. Okay, so I'm just going to grab I'm going to select the plants. Everything is a plant, I'm going to select it. And I'm going to use another tool. I'm going to use the Eyedropper tool. You can pick not only colors, but attributes, like the gradients. You see, with one click, I could pick the gradient of that one. I'm doing it again. So I select all of the shapes I created for the plants, and I only had one gradient finished yet for that one in the left corner. And I use the Eyedropper tool, and I just click on the one I wanted to use for the others, and it's going to apply to everything here. So then I can move it over to adding to my islands. And there's another trick if you need to select the same kind of objects in your document. So let's say I wanted to select the plants. I can select one. I can go to the select, same, fill and stroke, and Illustrator going to select everything is similar to that one in the document. Because I want to do changes. I think that the light color is too much. Yeah, I think it's better now. All right, so I'm adding the plants, do some adjustments. So I select and I use the arrows on the keyboard, left and right. So I'm just changing the positions. Select, left, up, arrows on the keyboard. And I'm going to create another layer just between the islands and the background. I'm going to call it clouds. So let me create a few clouds. Pen tool. And I'm going to change the fill color to 0 because I need to see what I'm doing. It really doesn't matter if I'm overlapping the shapes of the islands because that layer is going to be one step below. So the island is going to overlap. So I'm drawing a few clouds. Thank you so much. Okay. So you can use a reference image or you can use anything you want. If you have something in your head, just try to keep it simple. Don't spend the whole day with that mini assignment. Okay. So I need to select everything had that same line in the document because I wanted to select the clouds at the same time, because I took a mistake and I was drawing the clouds on the island layer, and I need to move the clouds to the cloud layer. So just select the first cloud, I go to the select menu, same, fill and stroke. So it's going to help me to select all of them at once. And in the far right, if you see that little tiny rectangle in your layer, you can grab it and you can move all of these shapes with one move to the cloud layer. So it's going to be down here, and I can start playing with the gradients. I'm going to move it to my regular layer. All right. So I don't need the fill color. I mean the stroke color. I'm playing with the fill color. And if once you separated the shapes are belong together, in this case the clouds, when you separated them into one layer, you can select them very easily. You just click on this little icon up here, click to target, to drag, to move appearance. If you click on that icon, it's going to select everything on the layer for you, and I can start playing around with my gradient. That gradient is a preset in Illustrator, fading sky. Let me see what's going on here. You can change the opacity of your colors. So you can have a gradient is fading into 0. You see the opacity is put on 0. If I put it on 100%, it's going to be that blue. I'm going to change it to white, and I'm going to add a little opacity, like 50%. I'm going to change the angle to -90, because I wanted to have the majority of my clouds white, and the bottom part I wanted to turn it to that darkish, like this is how it is in real life. When the sun hits the top of the clouds, it has a light color, and where it's in shadow, the bottom part is a kind of darker. So that is what I'm trying to imitate here. Okay. I'm going to fading those clouds to 0. Let me show you what I'm doing. So the upper part is going to fade into 0. And those clouds are a little bit too hard edged. The edges are not realistic. It's too hard. So I'm going to apply a blur effect. I select the clouds. I go to the effects, blur, Gaussian blur. I'm going to add a little blur. So I'm going to make it much softer, right? Yeah. So it got kind of soft. I think I'm going to try the same with the plants. So I select one plant or forest piece. I go to the select, same, fill and stroke. So it selected all of them at once, and I go to the effects, blur, Gaussian blur. I think that was a little bit too much, so I'm going to add a little blur. So it's not going to be that very sharp edged object. It's going to be a little bit softer. Maybe the background needs a little change in the color. And the water. It's a little bit more greenish. Right? Okay, and the very last step I'm doing is I'm going to add those little buildings. So I'm going to create a new layer. But I'm going to keep it very simple. So I'm just going to draw a few simple shapes. So make sure everything everything has a gradient in your document. Use the gradient tool, add gradients. I'm gonna keep it very primitive, very simple. It's just a short mini assignment. Experience and use the gradient tool. Because I can't hardly wait to start working on my illustration for sci-fi or fantasy. Is this the sky?
Or the construction.
Or the construction? Yeah, in Florida, you never know. So I have the buildings. Select one shape. I go to select. Same fill and strokes. It already selected everything. I'm gonna name that layer to buildings. Let's move it to my environment. What is that? It sounds scarier than a storm. I think I'm done with that. I don't think I need to spend more time with the mini. So I added a bunch of gradients and applied blur effects. Just a little stylized copy of the landscape.